So let's first think about the term and why do we use it and why do we need it and what do we really mean by digital native. On the very, I think, basic logic, a digital native is someone who grew up when there's always been internet, and people who are not digital natives, who can also be called digital immigrants, only got exposed to internet later on in their life. So when we say digital native, what people might assume is that those people who grew up with internet have a certain technical and maybe even media literacy skill set already inherent in them, when that can actually mask a lot of the inequalities that youth face growing up. So even though a lot of youth have been exposed to information on the internet and social media at the same time, there is a huge variation of the experience of internet and also the knowledge that they've been able to acquire. A similar example could be with someone having parents who work at a tech company growing up, and my parents were in the service industry, so obviously I've never got any conversations around technologies with them. And then depending on what school you go to and the type of devices that you grow up with, I think it can be dangerous to assume that all the adults now have to learn from children, or kind of just wait till they grow up and give us all the answers about technology. I think it just means that we are kind of leaving them behind and just assuming that they are able to quickly adapt to any new device that they are exposed to now, going forward. One of the other things that has impacted me the most that I've read from the chapter is this one quote: "Neither teens nor adults are monolithic, and there is no magical relation between skills and age. Whether in school or in informal settings, youth need opportunities to develop the skills and knowledge to engage with contemporary technology effectively and meaningfully." So the notion of digital native, whether you assume it's something good, that maybe children are very adaptable nowadays, or it's something negative that maybe they've completely changed the way they learn the information and maybe their attention span is now much smaller. So regardless of what type of attitude you attach to it, it has unintended consequences. And it also obscures as I said, the uneven distribution of technological skills and media literacy across the youth population, presenting an inaccurate portrait of young people as uniformly prepared for the digital era and ignoring the assumed level of privilege required to be native. Worse, by not doing the work necessary to help youth develop broad digital competency, educators and public end up reproducing digital inequality, because more privileged youth often have more opportunities to develop these skills outside the classroom. So, rather than focusing on generational categories, it makes more sense to focus on the skills and knowledge that are necessary to make sense of the mediated world. Both youth and adults need to learn a lot. And rather than assuming that youth have innate technical skills, parents, educators, and policymakers must collectively work to support those who come from different backgrounds and have different experiences. I think we really need the support to navigate this new networked public online, and especially knowing how our personal information flows and how to meaningfully interpret the information-rich environment that we're in. And that's why we need both youth and adults to work together and support each other in understanding this new world we're in. And a final question that I wanted to bring up is, what do you think we should use instead of digital native? Or should we keep using it and maybe modifying it? Or if there's a way to really understand what we are trying to say when we say digital native. Is it just the very basic difference, as I said earlier, that some people grew up with internet being around them already and some grew up when it wasn't there yet? Or do you want to address a certain way that youth are learning things today when it comes to especially being adapting to new technologies? Like, what are we really trying to say? And if there is a new term maybe you're thinking, or maybe if any of you have used something else instead of digital native that could be like a better version. And I know it's been actually like rejected by many scholars, but it's still very popular in like popular media and people still use it. So that's kind of the problem that like scholars see. And another thing is, even the words like native and immigrant, I think in themselves have a certain like layer of meaning, which is important to keep in mind whenever we use a term. Like, what does it like remind you of? Where do you think it's coming from? Who created those terms is also important to know. So I'm just curious if any of you have any new ideas for a new term we can use. I think it's not too late to just start using something fun and new that can really express how we feel and what we want to focus on.